Phil here, and in this video we're going to talk about online safety. Let's look at the internet for what it is as an environment. Let's look at it as a place that we choose to go and where we spend our time. Let's look at what the internet actually represents to us. It's a pretty crazy thing. It's like one of those Harry Potter type mirrors where everyone looks into it and they see something that's only relevant to themselves. It's something that seduces absolutely everyone because there is something for everyone on it, and not just something they're vaguely interested in. It could be literally about them. It'll be exactly what they're into. It'll be completely morphed around their identity. Ever had those experiences where you're interested in buying something and all of a sudden you go online and all of the advertisements are lining up around that thing that you might be interested in? The internet brings us closer to everything that we like. And a pre-internet world, as I remember it, could be pretty boring and frustrating. I mean, I love libraries, but there's no library in the world that gives you the same type of available information, graphics, movies, sound and vision in the way that the internet delivers it right to your fingertips. The internet brings us closer to our favourite celebrities, our pop stars, movie actors, our sports stars. Suddenly, we're able to find out more about them, maybe get in touch with them briefly, see all their scandals, look at their life events, watch them do wonderful things. And let's add to the mix the gaming environment. Console games, PC games, virtual reality, the ability to escape your own mundane place in the world and transport yourself to heroic levels anywhere on the globe or in an intergalactic environment. And then there's all the illicit stuff, the tempting, darker side, the availability of pornography, the black market for drugs, the availability of counterfeit and stolen property at cut prices. There's always someone dangling something that you know isn't right, but it might look tempting. And it's difficult to ignore. Add into the mix that when you're on the internet, you can pretend to be whoever you want. Not happy with yourself and the things that you feel insecure about? Why not steal an identity and impersonate someone else for a while? Want to feel more desirable? Why not go catfishing a little bit? Why not hide behind an avatar, a fake picture, a cloud of misinformation? Genuinely, why even be yourself? A recent study suggested that for every selfie picture that makes it onto the internet, most people have taken and rejected more than 10 others to get a version of themselves that they're happy with. Some people take even 60 or more and sit there for prolonged periods trying to get that angle just right. So if we want to stay safe online, we really need to consider what it is that we're staying safe from. I can't list all the dangerous things that are out there on the internet. Let's be upfront about that right away. And another thing is that even when we do know about certain risks, we can only limit the likelihood of them causing you any harm. Unless we unplug the internet and walk away from it, we have to live with it as an environment that has an inherent risk attached to it. I became a teenager when the internet really started to happen. The two things were pretty simultaneous. There was no internet when I was 14 years old, but by the time I was 16, it was all happening. I mean, it's been a revolution, a major point in humanity jumping forward and evolving. As technology goes, what Tim Berners-Lee created has affected life for the vast majority of people pretty much everywhere. I want to be upfront about this. While I acknowledge the risk and the dangers attached to the internet, I love it just as much as everyone else. So let's consider some of those risks. Number 1, addiction. This has to be really high on our list. The internet has the ability to feed pretty much any addiction and actually become an addiction of its own. Developing an addiction is usually about a series of repetitive behaviours resulting in rewards and a sensation of doing well. You go back and you want to do it again. There's a pattern and an effect in your brain that gets carved out. We know that an addict has effectively discovered a method of stimulating the production of a chemical in the brain that makes them feel good. They flood the pleasure center of the brain with a substance called dopamine. Having found some way of doing that, naturally you want to go back and do it again and again and again. You can be addicted to drugs, alcohol, gambling, food, even scoring goals in your favorite sport. Music, performance, adrenaline events like bungee jumping. There's no end to it. As a method of stimulating addiction, the internet is right up there. In fact, social media bosses have admitted that their products are addictive, and certain social media companies even use behavioral scientists to measure the effectiveness of their product by checking how frequently their users log in as an indication of how compelling their offer actually is. Social media is addictive, but it also links us through to other addictive experiences. Lots of people have had to resort to treatment and support services for online shopping, for problems with pornography consumption, for internet dating problems, for gambling in a variety of different forms. Addiction to the internet itself is becoming a massive issue, and what is now known as internet addiction disorder is very real. Self-diagnosis is notoriously unreliable, and very few people, when challenged, are willing to admit that they spend far too long behind their screens. As this is a really new area of research, there are no agreed and standardized criteria being used to tell us whether or not you're in the category of being addicted to the internet or whether you have internet addiction disorder. But depending on who you consult, estimates go as high as 38% of people that would sit within that bracket. 38% of all users. There's like more than 4 billion internet users in the world. That's a huge number. I'm not going to lie, I might definitely be one of those people. Answer this question for yourself honestly. When was the last time that you went a whole day without internet or email or social media or mobile phone use? Let's think about abusive behaviour, because that's got to be on our risk list too. When I say abusive behaviour, everyone immediately presumes that I'm talking about avoiding the people that might be abusive towards them. Receiving abuse online is never nice, and I think we're all aware that the internet is full of trolls who say and do pretty horrible things to get attention for themselves and to make other people feel bad. Blocking and ignoring trolls is becoming a pretty standard thing that everyone has to do. But the internet has a pretty crazy way of doing something even more disturbing than putting you in contact with people who want to abuse you. The internet has a way of making you more abusive. Even in the most mild and polite of people, you can see them becoming pretty unkind once they get behind the keyboard. The phenomenon of the pile-on can be hard to resist. When one person is seen to do something unacceptable, and vast numbers of people then rush to judge and jump in with comments and memes and put downs. There is the sharing of content, the passing on of gossip, the embarrassing photos. Can you honestly say that your internet use hasn't ever brought the worst out in you? The petty side, the side that needs to have the last word, the need to win an argument and be seen as the bigger and better person who is more clever, more witty and more everything. While block and report is an absolutely valid response to internet trolls, what we also have to do is be more honest with ourselves about our own conduct online. The fact is that many of us behave online in a way that we would never contemplate behaving in real life. Imagine walking into a room with a group of complete strangers and doing half the things that people are generally willing to do in a thread of comments on, say, for example, Reddit or Twitter. For some reason, being behind the keyboard, not seeing the people on the other end of the comments, being able to visualize yourself differently, being able to picture them in a particular way, it all adds up to some pretty negative outcomes. When you go online, there's a very genuine risk of you becoming an The internet is a huge environment for different forms of crime, and there is a lot of crime, and there's a lot of exploitation out there. Fraud is rife online. Fake offers on second-hand selling sites, phishing scams that tell you that your bank account has been compromised, opportunities to make money that seem too good to be true. They are. It's all out there. People will part you from your money online and it will disappear into nowhere fast. Plus, people committing crime online can be anywhere, in parts of the world where our law enforcement agencies don't have a hope of getting anywhere near. Take it from me, I've investigated fraud online. And when that investigation leads you back to Nigeria, that investigation is over. India, Indonesia, Nigeria are currently leading the world in internet fraud, but Venezuela, South Africa and Brazil are also high on that list too. It really depends on who you consult. At this point, when you're online, you can never really count on where another person is. They could be just down the street or they could be the other side of the world. Using a fake internet protocol to suggest that you're somewhere else is super easy. And getting hold of a VPN, well, a virtual private network, they're now being sold to everyone, not just as a method to hide behind for crime, but to protect your own privacy. Fraud includes blackmail and theft, and people have an incredible ability to use the internet to gain remote access to your private computer files and lift and remove key financial information. Crime also includes sexual exploitation. There are roughly 4.6 billion people using the internet actively, and many choose to construct false identities, and this includes switching all the things that define who they are, leaving little to trace them by. Lots of young people who are not yet 16 and who are definitely not 18 are beginning to explore their own sexuality, and the offer of anonymity and the illusion of privacy makes it feel safe when it's not. For a lot of people, this actually involves making themselves more vulnerable because they pretend to be over key age boundaries in order to gain access to chat rooms and different types of content. This immediately gives predators a way out because they can always claim, even if they strongly suspect or even believe otherwise, that they thought they were talking to an adult that just looked younger. Sexual exploitation and grooming are very real. The offence of grooming is made complete when an offender who is over 18 makes contact with a victim who is under 16, and knowing or believing that to be the case, then arranges to meet up with them offline for the purposes of sex. It doesn't matter if the meetup actually happens or not, but the offender does have to travel with the intention of meeting the victim. This offence used to require the offender to make contact with the victim more than once, but this stipulation was changed in 2009 because of the speed at which many internet predators were able to build rapport and persuade young people to meet them IRL, in real life. The truth is not a pretty one. Online, you have to be guarded about your identity and your location, and you must never reveal this information to anyone. You should never meet anyone offline that you've only met online. You have no idea who or what they are. It is scary how easy it is to commit a crime online. I'd go so far as to suggest that, at least in theory, a huge number of people probably have, even if they don't realise it. Have you ever sent an angry message that could be described as grossly offensive or threatening, or contains information which is false or which you believe is false? Check out the Malicious Communications Act 1988. That's a crime right there. If you're not 18 but you've made sexual images of yourself and you've posted them, or if you shared them, or if you sent them to a specific individual, check out Section 11A of the Children's Act 1978 to take or permit to be taken or made an indecent image of a child. Then check out Section 11B of the same Act, which is an offence to distribute such images. These are incredibly serious offences that regard legislation utilised to prosecute paedophiles and register them for safeguarding purposes. The biggest fear around young people who choose to create and distribute indecent images of their own bodies is how they're feeding into an illegal market for such content on the dark web, and how subsequently, no matter how much they might regret it, there's no way to recover such images from the internet. This is deep, deep water. Aside from being aware of it, and you might want to check out my other videos that regard pornography and indecent imagery specifically, there are hundreds, thousands, even millions of cautionary tales from teenagers all over the world who wish that they hadn't made these mistakes. The advice on this topic specifically is very, very clear. If you don't make those images, and you don't allow your boyfriend or girlfriend to take such images of you or of themselves, you're never going to get the wrong side of that legislation. More than anything else, this is me saying, just don't do this. Okay? When I was a police officer, I could help most people out with things. I would try my hardest to help people when they were in such distressing circumstances. When it came to sitting down with someone who realised that there were naked images of themselves being hosted in multiple places online, there was very little that I could do about that. Sleep pattern. You might not see this one coming, but yeah, I said sleep pattern. I know people who've allowed their body clock to drift quite literally into a different time zone because they've steadily stayed up a little bit later and a little bit later, binge watching online services, playing computer games until the early hours, not putting their social media down at a reasonable hour. All of a sudden, it's 3 a.m. Now, during the COVID-19 pandemic lockdowns, this got to a crisis point. I know some who stayed up until 5 a.m. gaming, and some who claimed they stayed up all night and just drank energy drinks instead. If you do get yourself up in time for school, after falling asleep at 3 a.m, trying to hit the day with 3 hours sleep is like a brutal form of punishment. In fact, sleep deprivation is listed as a form of torture under the Third Geneva Convention of 1949. And can constitute a war crime when enemy soldiers are denied a reasonable sleep pattern. Why would you do this to yourself? I've literally seen people living on Eastern Standard Time. This is basically the time zone of North America. And by the way, it's 5 hours behind our own. So you get up at 11:30 a.m. routinely, where your school friends are getting up at 6:30 a.m. Your 6:30 a.m. is happening in New York. Denying the developing body and mind sleep can incur lots and lots of problems. And this includes memory loss, poor brain function, an increased risk of diabetes, immune system problems, an increased risk of low mood, or even clinical depression. Do you wake up in the night and check your phone? Do you fall asleep watching YouTube or streaming services? Do you give yourself a full hour of time without looking at a screen before you go to sleep? Only you know the answer to those questions. So let's talk about managing and controlling some of these risks. These are the risks that everyone is vulnerable to, and in a major cross-section of young people, I'd imagine that a lot of young people have experienced these things to a greater or lesser extent. You have to be really honest with yourself about where you are against those issues. Here's 10 points of broad advice to help you beat those issues and use the internet in a more positive and a more healthy way. 1. Offset the time you spend online. So for every half an hour you spend online, make sure that you invest that same amount of time in doing something else too. Reading a book, walking your dog, playing a sport, learning to play a musical instrument. If you can't do that, it's a sign that there's a lack of balance in your lifestyle. You might want to have a look at that. 2. Be wary of strangers online. If you've never met them in person, they might seem cool, they might seem fine, but you cannot believe that they are who they say they are. Assume nothing, believe nothing, check everything. A, B, C. 3. Block and report. Don't waste time challenging trolls. They love that. No. Just block and report, move on. 4. Test your behaviour before you send that social media message. Would you behave like that in person? Would you behave like that if the person receiving your message was someone that you respected and loved? If someone that you really thought very highly of was watching you, would you still be doing that? 5. Don't pretend to be older than you are, and don't use false identities to gain access to sites and services that aren't intended for your age range. It just doesn't end well. 6. Don't create, don't send, and never ask for nudes or sexual selfies. Just swerve that mistake altogether. Don't share any financial information online. If you're shopping online, stick to the main sites. Don't try to save a couple of quid by taking silly risks. If it seems too good to be true, guess what? It probably is. If you receive an email from a site, don't use the email to visit the site. Instead, approach the site via Google. And that's particularly true with banks. If you are a social media user, make sure that your passwords are secure and that your security settings are high. Don't let strangers view your photographs and your personal details. Yes, you want new followers, but balance this by considering what the likelihood is of you becoming the next internet sensation versus the risk that is posed to your personal safety. 10. Manage your sleep. Make sure you're getting at least 8 hours. Stay inside your own time zone. Put the devices down at 9 p.m. People get to know that you don't respond after that time. This not only helps your sleep, but it gives you a bit of space and time to yourself, which is a really healthy thing. Remember, I don't promise that these steps are going to make you 100% safe online, but it's good advice and it will make you safer, and in the long term, it will make you happier too. I hope this video has helped. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.